Already better.
Yeah. Welcome to Nutrition Equity, the podcast that's all about the Medical Nutrition Equity Act, or MNEA. I'm your host, Joanna, and the MNEA is a game changer aiming to compel healthcare companies to cover the cost of medically necessary items like medical foods, medical formulas, and essential vitamins. Now here's the catch. The MNEA hasn't passed through Congress just yet, but there's hope on the horizon. We are actively seeking a House Republican to reintroduce the crucial piece of legislation to get more involved and learn more about to get more involved and learn more. Be sure to visit our website at nutritionequity.org. October happens to be Homocystinuria, or HCU Awareness Month. To honor this occasion, I will be bringing you a series of interviews with individuals who have homocystinuria, shedding light on their challenges, triumphs, and potential impact of the MNEA on their lives. In today's episode, we have a special guest joining us today. Danae Bartke. Danae is not only a patient herself, but also the executive director of HCU Network America and the sibling of another HCU patient. Her brother also struggles with classical homocystinuria, and she's here to share their story and why the MNEA is so crucial. So stay tuned and for this insightful conversation as we dive deep into the world of medical nutrition equity and the hope it brings to those affected by the conditions like HCU. Let's get started. Really. Okay. So now here's the so stay tuned for this insightful conversation as we dive deep into the world of medical nutrition and the hope it brings to those affected by the conditions like HCU. Let's get started. Can you tell us about your story, about your personal journey with HCU and how it's impacted you and your life and your family's life?
Yeah, so Garrett and I were both diagnosed in 1995. I was 10 years old and Garrett was 5. And so when we were born, the state of Illinois did not have newborn screening. So subsequently, we were missed just because there was no screening. And so Garrett, early on in his childhood, missed every single milestone. He didn't sit up on time. He didn't crawl on time. He didn't walk on time. He didn't talk on time. Everything came about a year to a year and a half late. So when Garrett's lenses dislocated when he was just shy of his 5th birthday, as upsetting as it was, it also kind of allowed us to have some closure on to why so many things had happened to Garrett. Myself, on the other hand, I didn't have any developmental delays. I had what most people would just call quirks. I had a lot of sensory quirks, especially to the way things felt. And I had some pretty bad temper tantrums, even at the age of 10. It's pretty embarrassing now in retrospect, but I think it's an important thing to note. Just because it's not typically something that you would notate with homocystinuria, but it definitely was. But the diagnosis came as a shock to our family. There was no one else in our family, obviously, with homocystinuria. So it was a complete learning curve. And we really struggled with the diagnosis. Our family, my grandparents lived close by. My grandma, she tried so hard to make low protein bread. My aunts tried so many different ways to get us to take our formula. But given that we were so late diagnosed, we knew what everything should taste like. And when you go from a regular diet to a low protein diet, there's no fooling anyone about low protein bread and low protein meats. They don't taste the same, unfortunately. So it took a really long time. It wasn't until in my 20s, my mid 20s, early mid 20s, I should say, I experienced a blood clot. And it wasn't until then when I got connected with the PKU organization of Illinois here and was invited to a cooking class that I finally understood how to actually navigate a low protein diet. So it took many years to get to the point I am today. And I've thankfully, with the education that's been provided and the things that I've learned since then, I've been able to maintain diet and do really well for myself.
As the executive director of HCU Network America, could you describe your role in helping patients and parents of children with HCU?
Yeah. So I co-founded HCU Network America in 2016 with our president, Margie McGlynn. We started off really focused on classical homocystinuria, and then in 2019, we expanded to cover cobalamin disorders and severe MTHFR. What we do is we help provide support, education, advocacy, and research to the homocystinuria community. A lot of what we do for families is number one, we invite them into the community and let them know that there is hope, because compared to where we were when I was diagnosed in 1995, not a lot was going on for homocystinuria. There was still a lot left unknown. In fact, when we were diagnosed, they gave us very terrible statistics that I'm not even going to entertain because they're no longer valid, but they were things that you should never tell a patient. Now, though, there's so much hope. There's so many educational resources and so much happening in terms of clinical trials. So we really try to educate families on what proper treatment can look like depending on what their clinic is prescribing and the importance of adhering to their treatment, but also giving them some questions they can ask their clinic, just so, because we know that an engaged patient or an engaged parent in this process is much more successful than someone who takes a back seat and just kind of listens and does as they're told. We need it to be a dialogue between the patient or caregiver and the clinic. So we do a lot of education on what proper treatment can look like. We also provide resources to help families on the daily basis of navigating these, providing them with tips and tricks. We know taking formula and cysteine is very difficult, and also just navigating the low protein diet can be hard. So we try to really empower patients with resources and tools to guide them on their daily journey with homocystinuria.
Mhm. Could you explain the difference between the three types of homocystinuria?
Yeah, so there's three main groups of homocystinuria. There's classical homocystinuria, cobalamin disorders, and severe MTHFR. All three types of homocystinuria have high homocysteine, and that is why they're called the homocystinuria. Homocystinuria literally just means an elevation of homocysteine in the urine. The general population can also have homocystinemia, which is just an elevation in the blood. If you have an elevation in the blood, it does not mean it's an inborn error of metabolism like homocystinuria. You really need to see a geneticist to find out the root cause. And there are so many different reasons: B6, B12 deficiency, folate deficiency, even liver problems, smoking, bodybuilders who eat too much meat. There's a lot of different reasons for high homocysteine levels outside of homocystinuria. So it's important to understand the root cause. Classical homocystinuria, though, also has high methionine, so that's an important thing to mark. Classical homocystinuria is treated with a low protein diet if not B6 responsive. So B6 responsive is usually trialed first, and if they're found not to be B6 responsive or only partially B6 responsive, then they add a low protein diet and medical formula, and then in some cases also cysteine. Not all countries will use cysteine or betaine. Cobalamin disorders, There are a lot of different cobalamin disorders, but cobalamin C through cobalamin X are also homocysteinurias. Some of them also align with a group called methylmalonic acidemia. It's more than half of them. And so there's a little bit confusion there as well. But the cobalamin disorders that are C through X do have high homocysteine. However, their methionine levels are low. And because their methionine levels are low, they are not prescribed a low protein diet. Instead, they're prescribed what would be called a heart healthy diet, avoiding red meats, cheeses that are very heavy in saturated fats. So more your lean, good protein is better. Then they're also prescribed cysteine. That's a very important part too. And then hydroxycobalamin, which is a very specific form of B12. Then the last group is severe MTHFR. Severe MTHFR is not the same as regular MTHFR, where there's two very common polymorphisms. In common MTHFR, the two polymorphisms are present in about 30% of the Caucasian population, at least here in the US. Those are not severe MTHFR. Severe MTHFR is when there is an elevation of homocysteine. Not all MTHFR causes high homocysteine, so it's important to note that. MTHFR also has high homocysteine and low methionine, but because of where it sits in the pathway, patients are only prescribed cysteine and then a specific form of folate, or I think it's folinic acid. It might be something else, but it's a very specific form of folate because it sits in the folate pathway. So those are the three main types, and they all present very differently. So I won't even go into that because that could take another 20 minutes just to talk about symptoms. So
Right. You mentioned that, so I noticed on the website that they don't, that they're currently not testing for MTHFR.
yeah,
Can you
only
explain that?
yeah, so classical homocystinuria is tested for in all 50 states through newborn screening. Cobalamin disorders, at least the ones with methylmalonic acidemia, are tested for as secondary conditions. So what that means is that states will test, there's a primary condition they're looking for, and then they will flag things that flag specific results that result in cobalamin disorders. And then MTHFR, unfortunately, I should say MTHFR, cobalamin E, cobalamin G, and cobalamin D, HCY, are not tested for in most states. There are some states that will flag them though, and those states have a low methionine cutoff on their newborn screening. So classical homocystinuria is tested for by a high methionine. So some of the states then make a low methionine cutoff. And so I've only heard of maybe 2 or 3 states, I think it's 3 states that will flag the severe MTHFR or disorders that have low methionine, which is a good practice for them to have in general.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. How does the MNEA, if passed, specifically benefit individuals and families dealing with homocystinuria, classical homocystinuria, and Cobalamin disorders?
Yeah, so coverage is so tricky. It varies state to state, age to age, diagnosis to diagnosis, insurance plan to insurance plan. So really I had someone recently reach out about coverage in the US because they would love to move here. And it's really hard to kind of give a easy summary about the coverage here in the US because it is so diverse. I can't emphasize that enough. So really what this would do is it would require insurance companies to cover inborn errors of metabolism, their medical nutrition. It would require insurance companies to cover it. And so that's for any condition, I believe, on the RUSP. I might be wrong about who specifically, but it would close this gap. And so it would require insurance companies to cover low protein food and medical formula, which would end a huge problem for the classical homocystinuria community. There's some states that have programs that cover formula. The state I live in has an amazing program. Everyone qualifies for who has homocystinuria. If you live and reside here and you go to clinic care, they provide your formula. But at one point I looked at moving out of state, and my formula was going to cost $24,000. And I said, there's no world in which a different state could offset that price difference. So I'm living here. For cobalamin disorders, it would give them access to hydroxycobalamin, and it would force insurance companies to cover it. Right now, insurance companies won't touch it because it is not an FDA approved drug. It is only accessed through compounding companies. And unfortunately, they are seeing the price go up and up and up and up. And I just saw from one family that they're paying almost $1,500 a month. And that is absolutely terrifying. You shouldn't have to be forced between the roof over your head and medication for your child. And that's the case for a lot of families. And because it is not an FDA approved treatment, there tends to be less coverage and assistance programs for those for hydroxycobalamin as well. So this would close that gap.
What are some of the major challenges and financial burdens patients and families have with HCU, classical HCU, face when it comes to obtaining medical foods, formula, and vitamins?
Yeah, so I hit on that just a little bit there.
Yeah.
But it's the cost. Even with insurance coverage, I will be honest, if you still have if insurance covers 70 and you still have to pay 30%, that can be just too much for a lot of families. And so I there's not a ton of assistance. There's some of the formula companies do have us. Actually, almost all the formula companies have assistance programs set up to help families with coverage. Not everyone will qualify, but a lot of them do. Um, we, HCU Network America, do have a program through NORD. Based upon certain criteria, families can apply and hopefully qualify. It's not a ton of assistance, but it's a little bit of something. The medical food, I would say, is probably a harder area for coverage for patients and families. Insurance many times will cover the formula to a certain degree, but the medical food, it's not covered in a lot of cases. And thankfully, some patients might be able to get by with things that are in the store if they have a higher protein tolerance. But if you have a protein tolerance of 3 grams of protein a day, there's not much in the grocery store. Even your fruits and your vegetables, they add up, and you can't get by. And so the medical food is really an important part. And without access, they're at risk for medical deficits, just because they're not getting adequate nutrition.
Can you tell us about the upcoming externally led patient-focused drug development meeting on October 27th?
Yeah, so the Externally Led Patient-Focused Drug Development Meeting, or ELPFDD, is a meeting for the classical homocystinuria community with key stakeholders. And what that meeting does is that allows us to share with those key stakeholders. So it includes industry, researchers, the FDA. That's our primary target here because they're the ones that ultimately approve drugs and help with clinical trial design. And so what we're doing that day is that we have 3 keynote speakers, and the day is divided into 2 parts. The first, very opening session, is a session with a keynote speaker from the FDA. The first half of the day then is followed by Dr. Kimberly Chapman, and she will be giving a presentation on the symptoms and epidemiology of classical homocystinuria. Then we'll have some pre-recorded patient testimonies followed by a live discussion and some live polling and call-in sessions too. So people are going to be able to participate. Actually, they'll be able to pick up their phones and call in, and we really hope the community can come out and join us because every voice is so incredibly important and very diverse. And I think with the selection of speakers that we have, both the stakeholders and our community will quickly realize just how diverse we really are. And then we'll break for a short lunch, and then what we'll do is then we'll move into treatment. And that includes current existing treatment, hopes for the future treatment, and clinical trials and whatnot. So Margie McGlynn, our president, will give that overview of the therapies in development and what current protocol looks like. And then we'll kind of repeat what we did in the morning, but we'll have pre-recorded testimonies about treatment. And then we'll also have a live discussion, which also includes people calling in and poll questions as well. So the more people that call in and take part of the poll, the more interesting it will be. But one important note is that everyone can actually submit comments. So if you don't feel comfortable calling in or you don't have the ability to take time off from work, there is a comment section on our ELPFDD portion of our website, and you can submit your comments too with your experiences, both regarding treatment and symptoms. Everyone's voice is so incredibly important. And what we're going to do with all this information, so from the meeting, from the comments, we are going to actually work on something called a Voice of a Patient report. And then that becomes an official document that the FDA holds on to and references. So the more people that participate in this meeting with classical homocystinuria or their caregivers, and the more that actually submit these comments, the better understanding the FDA will have, and they'll be able to use this in their future approval of drugs, and they'll be in clinical trial design. So we really need, I can't stress enough how important it is for the community to show up to this meeting and participate either in the live day or by submitting comments. And there will be an open comment period 30 days after as well. So if you don't get to it before the meeting on the 27th, there still will be some time before Thanksgiving as well.
Mm-hmm.
And anyone in the world can participate with classical homocystinuria, so you don't have to be from just the US.
Mm-hmm. So what are the key advocacy efforts and initiatives that individuals can get involved in to support the MNEA and raise awareness for HCU?
Yeah, so what we have been doing is encouraging patients and caregivers and even providers. There's a portion on the Nutrition Equity website where they can submit their patient caregiver experience when it comes to coverage. That is so important for the understanding the landscape of what is and isn't being covered and the burden that it drives. And providers can also share the impact that it has on providing proper treatment to their patients, which is incredibly important, because I can't imagine how frustrating it is as a provider when your patients can't access the resources they need to actually be healthy. It's really sad. The other thing that we're encouraging people to do is to get involved. Call your congressman, write them letters, tell them to support the Medical Nutrition Equity Act. We need patients to be doing that everywhere, from every corner of the country. We also need patients to advocate for newborn screening, because patients who are diagnosed through newborn screening have better outcomes and better adherence overall, and just do better. And so newborn screening and the Medical Nutrition Equity Act really go hand in hand. And a lot of those opportunities exist side by side. And so really contacting your congressman, telling them to support the Newborn Screening Saves Lives Act and also the Medical Nutrition Equity Act, I think is one of the easiest things. And the Nutrition Equity website can help you navigate who your members are. And honestly, they have even a form that it's pre-populated. So you just fill out a little bit of information. You don't have to even add a whole lot. It's not something you should be intimidated by at all. And even if you get the opportunity to talk to them in person, you should never be nervous because your story, it's nothing someone can argue with you about. It's your story. Um, it's your facts. So lots of different ways to get involved, but the Nutrition Equity website probably is the easiest place to start and to understand what options are available.
What can the broader community of healthcare what can the broader community and healthcare industry do to understand and support individuals living with rare diseases like HCU?
Um, I think that the biggest thing is just working to understand what their needs are as individual conditions. We are not all the same. I know a lot of the formula companies, they would like to think that our formula tastes the same as an MSUD one, as a PKU one, but really that's it. That would be a big start in my book because so many patients struggle. And also, just making things accessible and affordable, and offering assistance programs where they can. We really want to be successful patients, and it's really hard when you can't access what you need in order to do well. Um, and I think, just also don't invoke a fear method on your patients. I think that's a really important thing. Yeah, we all know what we need to be doing, but it's really hard to do it. Even when things are accessible, it is difficult. So approach them with love and patience and grace. We are human, and most patients who go on regular diets just to lose weight fail. And so we are going to have times in our life where we fail too. The consequences are just so much greater. And so really be encouraging and help provide tools and tips and tricks to help set them on their course, but also connect them with the wider patient community, connect them with HCU Network America, connect them with the resources we have. Same for other patient support that may exist, like Cook for Love or Flock. There's lots of great resources out there that catch a wide umbrella as well.
Flock is currently not available yet, but it will be as
It's
of
coming.
year.
It's coming very soon.
Yeah. See, are there any specific messages or stories that you could share with our listeners during Homocystinuria Awareness Month to help raise awareness about the condition?
Yeah. Oh gosh, there's so many stories. It's so hard to always just pick one. I don't like playing like favorites at all.
Yeah.
But I think this one kind of speaks to the importance of, what a global connected community we really are. And I've used this example before, and I've had permission from the family. There's one family in Uruguay, and they are the only family who has been diagnosed with homocystinuria in the entire country. And at one point, they had troubles with access to their daughter's formula. And they were getting very nervous because they were about out. And the clinic, they were having a very hard time. In Uruguay, the clinic provides the formula for free, but you have to go through them. There's no other alternative. And they were very concerned their daughter was not going to have it. And just for one can of formula, it was as much as what they make in an entire month. So that really wasn't a feasible method. So she contacted me and was very nervous. I said, "Is there anything you can do?" And so we contacted her formula manufacturer here in the US and told them what was going on. And within a week, they had formula, but it's because of that global interconnectedness. And so sometimes it takes a little bit of, I wouldn't call it heat, but a little bit of pressure to get things moving along a little bit faster. And I think, and the family's doing really well now. The daughter, she just gave a speech to her class. She is celebrating her 11th birthday on this Sunday, and she is an amazing advocate. And she's only 11 years old, um, and I think it's really inspiring to see kids, owning their condition and sharing, because really, until we feel comfortable with our condition and sharing it with others, um, things will not change. We need to be able to be comfortable. This is not something we should be ashamed of. This is not something we did or asked for. This is something that we were just born with, and anyone could have been born with it. So it's really, I think, um, we have incredible advocates in our community, and we need to work together, so we can all succeed. That's really what the message of our community is. We're stronger together.
Mhm. How can people who want to support the cause of and or learn more about homocystinuria get involved in find out more information?
Yeah, so the first place I would recommend going to is our website, HCUNetworkAmerica.org. We have tons of different resources for classical homocystinuria, for the Cobalamin disorders. There's a resources tab, and underneath that, there's a toolkits and checklist, and that has all the toolkits and checklists we've created, which is numerous. And then there's also a research section of our website if they want to know what's kind of going on in that realm. But if you find that kind of heavy, you can kind of just follow us on social media and see what works for you. And so we're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube and LinkedIn. And so sometimes that's an easier way to kind of digest things. But we do have a monthly newsletter called the HCU Herald. If you go to our website, at the top, there's a bar where you can enter your email address, and then it will email you a survey for you to fill out. And then you just tell us what resources you're interested in. So that way we don't bombard your inbox with things that you don't want. And so that's a great way to stay connected if you're not a social media person.
Looking ahead, what are your hopes and expectations for the future for both the MNEA and for individuals and families affected by HCU?
Yeah, so I know there's been a huge group of people, advocates really working to get the MNEA passed. And so, ideally, I would love to see it passed and patients be able to have adequate access and coverage for their medical nutrition. Um, and so hopefully that happens sooner than later, because the cost of things are just getting more expensive and families are becoming more tight on their budgets. So we really need it to happen sooner than later. People that I never expected to be needing assistance are needing assistance now. Um, and that just goes to show, we need this. We need this desperately. The other area then you said is homocysteine. We have a lot of things happening in our community, and we need patients to show up and to participate. There's a lot of different ways, even if you don't want to necessarily go fundraise or advocate. There's a lot of research opportunities too. There's a natural history study for classical homocystinuria. There's also one through the NIH for the Cobalamin disorders. Those are a great way to help um, researchers understand the course of the conditions. There's also our data collection program through RareX, and that can be accessed at homocystinuria.rare-x.org. And it's a really wonderful opportunity just to share what your experience with homocystinuria has been. You create a, a profile, and then you fill out what I call the head to toe survey. It's called the health and development survey. And you just kind of tell people the areas that your body is affected. Has your head had effects? Have your ears? Has your throat? Has your neck? Has your chest has your waist, and so on and so forth. It goes on and on. And then other surveys will populate. And we've actually been able to already publish one publication in a journal on the dental effects of homocystinuria. And so that data is incredibly important for helping drive better understanding and drive new therapies, and also accelerate the timeline for these therapies. If there are two pieces, so like a natural history study, which is happening, and then this data collection, we can submit these pieces to the FDA, and they can use this to help accelerate the process. If we don't have these things in place and there's not enough data from them, drug development takes a lot longer. So the more patients that participate in the natural history study and the data collection program, the faster we can get new therapies to market. And it also lets other researchers and companies know that there is a market that does need new therapies. So, it's a win-win for patients and their caregivers. There's some other ways to also get involved, and patients can reach out to me as well for those. But there's a lot of ways. So we just, there's a lot of hope for the future. We just need an active and engaged community, and also attending the ELPFDD and participating in that is a great way to help things move forward too.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Danae, for sharing your heartfelt insights and experiences with us today. Your journey as both a patient and advocate for those affected by homocystinuria are truly inspiring. As we conclude this episode, it's clear that the Medical Nutrition Equity Act, or MNEA, carries immense significance not only for individuals and families struggling with rare conditions like HCU, but for the healthcare system as a whole. It's a beacon of hope for promising to alleviate the financial burdens that have weighed down countless lives. The stories we've heard today underscore the urgency of the MNEA's passage through Congress. It's a chance to bring about real change to ensure that essential medical foods, formula, and vitamins are accessible to all who need them. To learn more about the critical legislation and how you can support it, please visit nutritionequity.org. In our upcoming episodes, we'll continue to explore the journey towards nutrition equity and hear from more incredible individuals who have faced the challenges of homocystinuria head on. As always, we encourage you, our listeners, to join us in spreading awareness and supporting those affected by these conditions. Together, we can make a difference. That's it for today's episode of Nutrition Equity. Thanks for tuning in, and don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share this podcast with others who may find it informative and inspiring. Until next time, remember that every voice matters, and together we can create a world where everyone has access to nutrition they need for a healthier and more equitable future. Thanks.
Thank you.